Hello guys and welcome. Close your eyes and imagine yourself stepping back in time to a quiet frontier town in early 1872. The first light of dawn is just beginning to glow on the horizon. In the stillness of this early hour, everything moves slowly and gently. Before we journey further, if you find yourself enjoying this peaceful exploration of the past, feel free to give this a like and subscribe for more calm storytelling. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach. Now, take a deep breath and picture the scene unfolding around you. The air is cool and dry as night gently gives way to day. You find yourself standing on the single dirt road that runs through the heart of town. It's not much of a town, just a handful of simple clapboard buildings lining each side of the road, their wooden walls painted in faded whites and browns. In the dim gray light, you can just make out their false front facades, flat-topped and modest, each trying to look a bit more grand than it truly is. A rickety boardwalk of weathered pine planks stretches along the fronts of the buildings, providing a slightly raised path above the dirt. Your boots make a soft thump on the wood as you step up. The boards give a gentle creak under your weight. Everything is covered in a fine layer of dust. The porch railings, the empty barrels by the general store, even the old hitching posts waiting patiently out front. That dust finds its way everywhere. You'll taste a faint grit on your tongue when you inhale deeply. It's woven into the fabric of daily life here, settling on every windowsill, clinging to every boot and skirt hem. In a place like this, even the air carries the scent and memory of the earth. A dry wind stirs down the street, and you can hear a loose shutter gently tapping against a window frame. A tin sign hanging over the barber's shop swings ever so slightly, its chain clinking with each small gust. These are the only sounds right now, the quiet creak of wood and the soft whisper of the wind carrying a bit of that powdery prairie dust with it. It's a lonely, gentle sound that fills the wide silence of dawn. The horizon grows a little brighter. Gradually, the black dome of night yields to deep blue and then to a gentle wash of pink and gold above the flat expanse. The shapes of the town become clearer in this new light. To one side of where you stand, you see the outline of a small church with a peaked roof and simple steeple, its white paint peeling from years of sun and wind. Inside, a half-dozen rough wooden benches face a humble pulpit. A well-thumbed Bible rests there, waiting for the circuit preacher's next visit or for a town elder to lead prayers when no minister is available. In one corner stands a small foot-pumped organ, its varnish peeling and bellows patched, but still capable of wheezing out the chords of a familiar hymn. On Sunday mornings, this little building becomes the spiritual heart of the community. Families who have labored in dusty fields all week come in their cleanest clothes to sit shoulder to shoulder on those benches. They sing Amazing Grace, or Shall We Gather at the River with earnest voices, the organ faltering now and then, but no one minds. For a short time each week, in this plain sanctuary, they find fellowship, comfort, and hope together. Next to the church is a low building that serves as the schoolhouse on weekdays. It's quiet now, of course, just a simple one-room structure with a single brick chimney. A small bell hangs from a beam, ready to call the town's children when the time comes. A couple of wooden tables and a chalkboard are likely all that await inside, but that little school represents progress and the promise of learning in this remote place. Even the youngest townsfolk have chores from sunup to sundown, yet on some days they'll gather there to recite their ABCs and practice their sums, if only for a few hours. Across the way, on the other side of the dirt road, stands the general store with its broad front porch. The porch is shaded by an overhanging roof, under which a few chairs and barrels sit, ready for locals to pause and pass the time. Through the store's front window, the glass a bit wavy and bubbled, you can just make out goods on the shelves. Sacks of flour and sugar, perhaps, a coil of rope, some folded calico fabric in blues and reds. A cat is curled up on that windowsill inside, nose tucked under its tail. It must have been hunting mice in the store all night. Cats are welcome here. They keep the vermin out of the precious food stores. The general store is like the heartbeat of the town. Later today, it will surely be a center of activity, a place to barter, buy, and gossip. But right now, it rests quietly, the cat and the canned goods and the dust motes all in their places, waiting. Just down from the general store, you see the modest little saloon, a squat building of clapboard that has seen better days. Above its door, a painted wooden sign hangs at an angle, faintly proclaiming Silver Star Saloon. The lettering is faded, and the silver star it once showed is now just a pale outline. Outside the saloon, a couple of empty whiskey barrels stand by the porch, and a trough for watering horses sits quietly with only a few inches of water left in it. The saloon doors, those classic batwing doors, are closed at the moment, and through them you see only darkness inside. It'll be quiet for a few hours yet. The piano within is still, the bar stools empty. The revelry of last night has long died away, and what remains is the slight smell of stale beer and tobacco smoke that even now drifts out when the wind pushes through the gaps in the doors. Farther down the street, toward the edge of town, there's the livery stable and blacksmith's workshop. Even in this dawn light, you can make out the tall barn-like shape of the stable and the attached corral. A couple of horses are already awake inside. You hear one give a gentle whinny, as if to protest the end of night. The scent of hay and manure is faint but familiar, grounding this place in earthy reality. Next to the stable is the blacksmith's open-sided shed. Hanging from a post is an iron horseshoe, and a wagon wheel leans against the side of the building, awaiting repair. Come full morning, the blacksmith will likely stoke his forge and send sparks flying as he shoes horses and fixes wagon axles. But right now, all is cool and dim there. For a moment, all is still. You pull your coat or shawl around you a bit tighter against the slight morning chill. Overnight, a thin dew settled on the ground, darkening the dust in patches, and you feel the dampness on your boots. Take a slow breath. The air is fresh in a way only early morning air can be, carrying a faint aroma of dry grass from the open land beyond town, mixed with a touch of wood smoke from some lingering coals in a stove or hearth. It's the kind of crisp, clean air that makes you feel alive and calm at the same time. From somewhere behind one of the buildings comes the first stirrings of human activity. A rooster suddenly crows, its crackling cock-a-doodle-doo breaking the silence. The sound echoes off the empty street and wooden facades. You imagine it strutting in a small yard behind the boarding house, or maybe near the stable, doing exactly what roosters are meant to do, announcing that a new day has begun. In answer, a dog lets out a brief bark, then falls quiet. Perhaps it raised its head at the rooster's call, and deciding it wasn't worth fully waking for, settled back down on the porch where it had been sleeping. As dawn turns the sky ever brighter, a few early risers emerge from their homes. The door of the boarding house, a 2-story structure down the road with a sagging porch, creaks open. A woman in a simple calico dress steps out onto the porch, carrying a broom in one hand and a lantern in the other, though the lantern is now extinguished. She is middle-aged, hair tucked under a kerchief, sleeves already rolled up. She pauses for a moment, looking at the sky to gauge the weather, then sets the lantern down and begins to sweep the porch boards with methodical strokes. You can faintly hear the swish, swish of straw bristles against wood. Little puffs of dust rise with each push of her broom, catching the first golden rays of sunlight. The dust twirls in the light, then drifts lazily to the street below. The boarding house lady, Mrs. Jenkins perhaps, yawns and leans her back into each stroke. Cleaning is an endless task in a town where the unpaved street sends dust everywhere, but it's how she welcomes each morning, by clearing away yesterday's dirt and starting fresh. You wander slowly in that direction, your boots scuffing lightly on the dirt road. Each step kicks up a small puff of powdery earth around your feet. A few sparrows flutter down onto the road, a little way ahead, pecking at something, maybe seeds or dead insects left from the cooler night. They hop out of your way as you approach, then flit off to a nearby trough. In the silence, the flutter of their wings is surprisingly audible, a soft whir like a whisper. As you come near the boarding house, you catch a mild fragrance of coffee drifting through an open window. The scent mingles with the cool morning air, rich, bitter, and inviting. Someone inside must have the pot on already, boiling up some grounds for the first brew of the day. Your stomach awakens at that smell, maybe reminding you that it's been a long time since last night's simple supper. In a few minutes, that coffee will be poured into tin cups for the boarders, perhaps 2 cowhands who spent the night in the back room, or a traveling salesman passing through. For now, though, the aroma simply floats out, a promise of warmth to come. Across the way, the farmer's wagon that was parked overnight by the stable begins to stir. You notice a mule shaking its head and the gentle clink of harness chains. The farmer, who arrived late last evening, too tired to continue on to his farm, steps into view from behind his covered wagon. He's a lanky figure, rolling his shoulders as if they're stiff. With deliberate movements, he unties the mule from the hitching post where it's been secured. He strokes the animal's flank and murmurs something that you can't quite hear, perhaps a gentle apology for the hard travel or a word of encouragement for the day ahead. The mule snorts softly and nuzzles the farmer's hand, already knowing the routine. The farmer then reaches into the back of his wagon and lifts out a dented pail. He carries it over to the water pump beside the stable and begins to work the handle. The pump emits a squeak and then a gush as clear water spills into the bucket. A few moments later, he returns and pours that fresh water into the trough. The mule eagerly dips its muzzle and begins to drink. The man stands by patiently, one hand on his hip, the other rubbing the small of his back as he looks around the town with a faint smile of recognition. He's been here many times after all. To him, Dry Creek is more than a town. It's a lone beacon of civilization in a vast frontier. He knows the next nearest settlement might be a full day's hard ride away. Out here, neighbors and supplies are scattered so far apart that this little main street, as humble as it is, feels like a lifeline. Everyone who comes here understands how precious this foothold of society can be amid the emptiness of the plains. The farmer's mule lifts its head, water dripping from its bridle, and gives a satisfied snort. Setting the bucket down, the farmer takes off his hat and wipes his brow with a faded red bandana. Even this early, a bead of sweat has formed from his morning exertion and the mule's body heat. He replaces his hat. You see it's a wide-brimmed felt hat, sun-bleached and misshapen by weather and wear, and gives the mule an affectionate pat on the neck. Another day of deliveries and hard travel lies ahead for him, but for a brief moment, man and beast simply share the quiet dawn together, taking things slow. Living in the Wild West means greeting each sunrise with a mix of hope and the sober knowledge of the trials to come. One day at a time, that's how life goes out here. You can feel it already as the farmer sets down his bucket and begins checking his wagon for the journey ahead. He tightens a rope here, adjusts a tarp there. A few empty flour sacks lie in the wagon bed, along with some produce crates, evidence of goods he sold or traded yesterday. Perhaps he brought vegetables or grain into town to exchange for tools and coffee. He moves stiffly, You can imagine the ache in his bones from long days bouncing on a wagon seat and longer hours behind a plow. But there's also resilience in the way he straightens up and nods to the boarding house lady across the way as she finishes her sweeping. They exchange a few friendly words about the weather or the condition of the road, their voices low and calm. The sky to the east is growing lighter by the minute now. A few stray clouds at the horizon catch the sunlight and glow peach and rose against the expanse of pale blue. The sun itself has yet to peek over the distant rise, but the promise of it is everywhere, in the gilded edges of clouds, in the long shadows that stretch westward from every fence post and barrel, in the way the chill in the air is slowly easing. With the town now beginning to stir, more subtle sounds layer onto the quiet. You hear the clatter of pans from inside the boarding house. Mrs. Jenkins must be cooking breakfast for her guests, maybe frying up some bacon or yesterday's leftover potatoes. The tantalizing aroma of frying bacon indeed soon joins the smell of coffee in the street, and if you listen carefully, you can make out a soft sizzling and the clink of a metal spatula against an iron skillet. At the livery, a stable boy, perhaps 12 or 13 years old, yawning and hair sticking up every which way, exits the barn carrying a fork and begins to toss some hay into the troughs for the horses inside. The animals whinny and shuffle at the sound and smell of feed. The boy whispers a few words to them, something encouraging or just gentle nonsense, as he goes about the chore. In a nearby chicken coop behind one of the houses, hens start to cluck and scratch as a young girl in a long nightshirt scatters a pan of grain for them. She shivers in the cool air, her bare feet poking from under her gown, and she doesn't linger outside longer than she needs to, scurrying back into the warmth after tending to the fowl. After a short while, the boarding house door opens again, and two men step out. They might be cowhands from a ranch out of town, who spent the night in one of the boarding rooms. They are dressed simply, sweat-stained hats, rough cotton shirts, worn trousers tucked into boots. One is shrugging on a leather vest as he walks, and the other is rolling a cigarette with a bit of loose tobacco and paper. They both still look half asleep. Mrs. Jenkins follows them to the door, handing each a tin mug brimming with hot coffee. They mutter thanks and step off the porch, blowing on the coffee to cool it. For a moment, they just stand there on the street near you, sipping in silence as they wake up to the day. The steam curls from their cups into the morning air. One of the cowhands rubs his neck, perhaps recalling the lumpy mattress he slept on. The other squints at the rising sun, already planning the long ride ahead to the ranch. They speak in murmurs about their next tasks, something about rounding up strays or fixing fence posts, but mostly they just enjoy the quiet dawn. Nearby, an old fellow who might be the town night watchman or just an early riser sits on a bench outside the saloon, the same bench that was empty a short time ago. He's got a wool blanket draped over his shoulders and a pipe in his hand, though it's not lit, perhaps out of tobacco or saving what little he has. He nods to the cowhands as they catch his eye, and they nod back respectfully. He's likely seen many mornings like this and many changes in this town over the years. As the younger men wander off to fetch their horses, the older man simply gazes down the street, taking slow breaths of the morning air, content in the moment. After a little while, the sun finally breaks the horizon, a blinding orange disk that sends a soft flood of light across Dry Creek. The facades of the buildings glow with that early golden hue, and the shadows of the hitching posts stretch long and thin across the road. The dew on the wagon wheels and leaves sparkles briefly before evaporating. Another day has officially begun. As the sun climbs a bit higher and the day edges toward mid-morning, the pace of the town picks up. What was gentle and slow becomes gently busy. The general store is one of the first establishments to open. You hear the distinct metallic scrape of the store's front door lock being turned. Then the door swings open with a jingle of a small bell above it. Mr. Thompson, the storekeeper, a portly man with suspenders and spectacles, steps onto the porch and stretches, inhaling the warming air. He surveys the street, raises a hand in greeting to the boarding house lady across the way, who is now shaking a rug out over the rail, and then proceeds to prop the store door open with a barrel. He leaves the barrel's lid slightly ajar, releasing a faint sweet scent of molasses into the air. Mr. Thompson disappears inside for a moment and returns with a broom as well. It seems sweeping the dust is everyone's morning ritual. He starts brushing out the doorway and the porch of his store, pushing the overnight accumulation of dirt back into the street, where inevitably it will find its way home again by evening. As he sweeps, a man approaches the store. It's Bill, the farmer with the mule, ready to pick up a few things before he heads back to his homestead. "Morning, Bill," the storekeeper calls amiably, leaning his broom against the wall. "Morning, Mr. Thompson," the farmer replies with a tip of his hat. They speak like neighbors, which they are in a sense, even if Bill's farm is several miles out of town. Here, everyone within a day's ride is a neighbor. Mr. Thompson heads inside ahead of the farmer, lighting a lamp on the counter, even though sunlight streams through the doorway. The interior of the general store is a trove of necessities and little treasures. Along one wall, shelves are lined with cans and jars, coffee, sugar, canned peaches, maybe some peppermint candies in a jar for those with a sweet tooth. Bolts of cloth in practical muted colors are stacked on another shelf. Patterns are few out here, mostly simple calicos suitable for work dresses. A barrel of hardtack biscuits sits near the counter, and beside it, another of salt pork. The smell of leather goods, harnesses, belts, boots, mixes with that of dried foods, creating the unique bouquet of a frontier store, part workshop, part pantry. The farmer hands Mr. Thompson a small list scrawled on a bit of paper, likely requests from his wife for coffee, maybe some new needles and thread, perhaps a treat for the children if coin allows. As the storekeeper begins assembling the order, another customer arrives, the blacksmith's wife, come to trade a basket of fresh eggs for lamp oil and flour. They exchange polite greetings. She sets her basket on the counter carefully, each egg wrapped in straw, and Mr. Thompson lifts one out to examine in the light, nodding in satisfaction at its freshness. Barter is common here. Not everyone has cash, so goods often exchange directly. She'll leave with a tin of kerosene for her lamps and a sack of flour, and the store will sell those eggs to someone else, or perhaps serve them at the boarding house. In the background of the store's quiet commerce, you notice a large ledger book open on the counter. In it, Mr. Thompson records these trades and credits. The pages are filled with neat lines of handwriting, dates, names, items sold or traded. This ledger is the memory of the community's economy. Some entries show debts that will be paid when harvests come in or when cattle are sold. Trust underpins every transaction. Folks extend credit, knowing they all depend on each other in the long run. Outside on the porch, two local women have met and begun a friendly chat after finishing their morning chores. One is young, perhaps a new bride, carrying a small wicker basket of laundry on her hip. The other is older, apron on and sleeves rolled, a bit of flour dusting her hands from kneading bread dough. They stand in the shade of the porch, talking softly about the things women always talk about: how well the sourdough starter is doing, whose child has a cough, the price of sugar these days. Their voices are low and soothing, almost as if not to disturb the tranquility of the hour. Now and then, one laughs quietly or clucks her tongue in sympathy. It's a gentle scene of companionship, reminding you that even in such a rugged place, human connection flourishes in small moments. Over by the blacksmith's shed, the day's labor has begun in earnest. You suddenly hear the sharp clang of hammer on metal ringing out into the street. The blacksmith is at his anvil, sparks flying as he shapes a glowing horseshoe fresh from the forge. The sound startles a few birds into flight and draws the attention of a couple of onlookers, particularly a boy of about 10 who has perched himself on a fence rail, watching the smith work with keen interest. Each strike of hammer on hot iron sends a shower of orange sparks skittering to the ground, where they wink out on the dirt. The rhythmic clang, clang, clang becomes a steady heartbeat in the soundscape of the town, assuring everyone that yes, the smithy's open and ready to fix whatever may be broken today. Near the blacksmith, a chestnut mare is tied to a post, awaiting new shoes. She shifts and nickers impatiently as the blacksmith works on one of her hoof pieces. A ranch hand stands by, stroking her muzzle to keep her calm. The smell of hot metal and coal smoke wafts from the forge, joining the medley of morning scents. The ranch hand has removed his hat out of courtesy and wipes his brow. Even mid-morning sun plus the heat of the forge have warmed the air considerably. The blacksmith, a burly man with leather apron and arms blackened by soot, pauses to dunk the red-hot horseshoe into a trough of water with a dramatic hiss of steam. He then carries it, still smoking, to carefully fit against the horse's lifted hoof. The mare snorts and stamps once, but the ranch hand coos to her, and she settles. Within minutes, the ringing starts again as the smith nails the shoe in place deftly. By the time the horse is reshod, the ranch hand will owe a small payment, or perhaps a favor. If he's short on cash, maybe he'll pay the smith back by helping him build a new fence next week. That's how things often work here. From up the road, a small pack of children come running and laughing. It's recess time at the little school. Yes, the school teacher, Miss Miller, has opened the schoolhouse for lessons today, and a handful of students are there. You see them now spilling out onto the dusty yard beside the school, the older ones minding the younger. There aren't many, perhaps 8 or 10 in total, ranging from toddlers who mostly watch to adolescents of 13 or 14 who should be working but are squeezing in a bit of schooling. Miss Miller herself steps out, keeping a watchful eye while giving them freedom to play. She's a young woman with her brown hair pinned tightly in a bun, wearing a serviceable gray dress. She came out from Ohio not long ago to teach these frontier children. Her face, even when stern, has a kindness behind the eyes. The children start a simple game. 2 of the older boys have carved sticks and a bit of string into what looks like a makeshift spinning top, and they take turns whipping it to keep it spinning in the dirt. A couple of younger girls skip around them, humming a nursery rhyme tune and pretending their rag dolls are dancing. One little boy, barefoot and breeches rolled up, has found a stub of chalk and doodles something, maybe a horse, maybe just squiggles on a flat piece of slate propped against the schoolhouse wall. It's a rare moment of carefree play in lives that, even so young, know a lot of work and responsibility. Their laughter echoes lightly, and you can't help but smile at the sound. Miss Miller claps her hands softly after a few minutes and calls them back in. "All right, children, time to practice our letters," she says in a melodic voice. There are mild groans of awe, but they obey, filing back inside where oil lamps dimly illuminate the chalkboard and primer books. The door closes, and soon the faint chorus of them reciting A, B, C drifts out of the window. Back on the main road, a bit of midday stillness sets in as tasks find a lull. The sun is now high and bright, pouring its light straight down onto the town. It's nearing noon, and with clear skies above, the heat steadily builds. The dirt street, earlier damp with dew, is completely dry now, and even starting to bake and crack in places under the intense sun. If you stand still, you can feel the warmth radiating from the ground through the soles of your boots. A few folks retreat to whatever shade they can find. The 2 women who were chatting on the store porch have since parted. One returned home to tend her baking bread. The other now walks slowly along the boardwalk with her laundry basket, heading for the creek to do the washing while water is plentiful. She's careful to stay in the shadows of the awnings as much as possible, adjusting her broad-brimmed bonnet to shield her face. The shadows under the buildings are short at this hour, huddling right at their foundations, offering just a slim band of respite. The general store's porch, being covered, has become an impromptu resting spot for an older gentleman, possibly the same who was outside the saloon earlier. He's moved here now, sitting on a wooden chair in the shade, slowly fanning himself with his hat. The heat doesn't bother him terribly. He's seen it all his life, but he's wise enough to take it easy. As he fans, he hums a quiet tune, an old folk song, perhaps Red River Valley, under his breath. The town marshal, a lean, middle-aged man named Evans with a tin star pinned to his vest, steps out of his office for a routine walk. He squints at the brightness and adjusts the brim of his hat low over his eyes. A revolver rests in its holster on his hip, and he carries himself with that particular calm authority small-town lawmen often have. As he strolls the street, he casually reminds a cluster of rowdy young cowboys near the livery of the town's ordinance. Boys, you know the rule. If you're staying in town, guns need to stay at the marshal's. Don't want any accidents. His voice is low and even, not threatening, just stating a fact. The cowboys, dusty from a recent cattle drive and looking to spend some of their earnings in the saloon later, nod and oblige. One by one, they unclasp their gun belts and carry them over to the marshal's office. They know from the sign posted on the edge of town, "Welcome to Dry Creek, check your iron with the marshal," that this town, like many others on the frontier, asks visitors to disarm while within the limits. It's a rule more and more settlements enforce, having learned the hard way that too much liquor and too many firearms can spell trouble. Marshal Evans hooks the gun belts over his arm and gives a satisfied little grunt. "You can fetch 'em when you ride out," he says. There's no resentment. The cowboys understand this is for everyone's safety, including their own. One jokes, "Reckon my aim ain't too good after a few whiskeys anyhow, Marshal." They share a friendly chuckle. The marshal tips his hat and resumes his slow circuit, the pistols safely in his keeping. By now the sun is directly overhead and the air is still and heavy. The whole town seems to languish under the weight of the heat. The morning's bustle has quieted. Most people take a cue from the climate to slow down. The blacksmith, having finished a couple of urgent tasks, takes a break. He's sitting just inside his barn's shaded entrance, shirt damp with sweat, glugging water from a tin dipper. He pours a bit over his head too, shaking his hair out like a dog, relief evident in his sigh. Over at the boarding house, Mrs. Jenkins has drawn the curtains to keep the inside cool. Through the open kitchen window, you can hear a few clinks of dishes as she tidies up the remains of lunch, dinner, she'd call it, the big meal usually eaten at midday. Perhaps she served her boarders some beans and salt pork stew with cornbread. Nothing fancy but filling. Now the dishes are washed and the kitchen has gone quiet in the early afternoon lull. Even the animals feel it. The pair of dogs that roam town, scruffy, yellow-brown mutts, have long since sought out a cool spot. One lies under the general store porch, only his paws sticking out from beneath the steps. The other found a damp patch of earth by the side of the stable, where a bucket was spilled earlier, and is currently sprawled on its belly, panting with eyes half closed. Here and there, you notice a few chickens clucking idly in whatever shade they find, too hot to do more than peck listlessly at the ground. A mottled gray cat, maybe the same one from the store window earlier, now sunbathes atop a railing, but even it flicks its tail lazily, conserving energy. From the open doorway of the saloon, which has now been propped open to invite any passing trade, there's a low tinkling of piano keys. Not a full song, just someone absent-mindedly playing a few notes, likely the saloon keeper's wife, or one of the off-duty saloon girls, idly testing a melody in the slow hours. The notes are plinky and hesitant, but they add a little texture to the muffled silence. Inside, the saloon is much cooler and darker than outside. Only a couple of patrons sit at this hour. The cowboys from earlier, now relieved of their guns, have decided to cool off with a drink. They sit at a table near the door, hats pushed back, glasses of beer in hand. The beer isn't very cold. There's no refrigeration beyond maybe a block of ice hauled from the mountains and kept in sawdust, and that's reserved for higher-paying customers in the evening. But it's wet, and that's good enough. They sip slowly, playing a lazy game of cards to pass the time. The barkeep leans against the counter, polishing glasses with a clean rag, content to let the afternoon be slow. In the far corner, a pretty young woman in a slightly gaudy dress, one of the saloon dancers, is indeed the one tinkering at the piano. She's not really playing a song, just running her fingers over the keys, maybe dreaming of a tune she heard long ago. The sound drifts out along with the smell of tobacco and lingering whiskey from the night before. Outside, the light takes on a bleached quality, glaring and white. The dusty road almost shimmers. On the distant horizon, above the undulating waves of heat, a few puffy white clouds have begun to gather, the kind that sometimes build into thunderstorms on a summer afternoon. A tiny breath of breeze picks up, offering a tease of relief. It carries the faintest scent of something earthy sweet, sagebrush or wildflowers from the open range beyond town, though it's hard to tell. Later in the afternoon, a new sight draws everyone's attention, a covered wagon trundling slowly into town from the eastern trail. It is drawn by two gaunt, dust-caked oxen, and the canvas cover is stained from long miles on the road. The wagon moves laboriously, as if every rotation of its wheels is a great effort. A lean man with a scraggly beard walks alongside, gently cracking a whip in the air to urge the tired oxen. On the driver's seat sits his wife, a worn sunbonnet on her head and a baby in her lap, while two older children peek out from the wagon's rear flap. They are migrants heading west, perhaps bound for California or Oregon, and Dry Creek is the first sign of civilization they've encountered in many days. The townsfolk pause in their late-day tasks as the wagon clatters down Main Street. The man slows the oxen to a halt near the water trough outside the general store. His wife offers him a canteen, and he takes a long sip, exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. Mr. Thompson steps out of his store, greeting the strangers with a courteous nod. The traveler clears his throat and humbly asks if he can water his animals and where he might find provisions. "Help yourself to the well, friend," Mr. Thompson says, pointing to the community well beside the store. Without hesitation, the man fetches a bucket and begins drawing water. His two children climb down from the wagon eagerly. They have been cooped up for countless hours on the trail. They are thin and dust-covered. A girl of about 7, in a threadbare calico dress, holds her little brother's hand. A few local children, curious, inch closer. One of them, the blacksmith's boy, offers the girl a tin cup of fresh water he just pumped. She smiles shyly and thanks him in a small voice before gulping it down. She hadn't tasted cool water in days. The traveler purchases some supplies in the store, a sack of flour, some dried beans, a bit of salt pork. He pulls out a leather pouch and counts out payment in precious coins. Mr. Thompson, seeing the family's state, quietly adds a handful of hard candy and a loaf of yesterday's bread into the parcel. The mother's eyes brim with tears at this kindness. She mouths a thank you as she cradles her baby and accepts the provisions. While their parents handle the rest, the children from the wagon mingle a bit with the town kids. The little boy, no more than 5, shows off a small wooden toy horse he's kept clutched on the journey. A town girl, perhaps feeling pity and camaraderie, skips into her house and returns with a ripe apple from her family's pantry, a rare treat on the trail. She presses it into the wagon boy's hands. He beams and bites into the fruit, juice dribbling down his chin as all the children giggle quietly. Moments of simple generosity like this lighten the heavy burden the family carries. At length, the father finishes securing the new supplies in the wagon. The oxen, now watered and somewhat rested, stomp their hooves and flick their tails, ready to continue. The sun is lowering, and he wants to find a safe camping spot before dark falls. He shakes Mr. Thompson's hand firmly. "Much obliged, sir," he says sincerely. He helps his wife back up onto the wagon seat, lifts his smaller son into her lap, and gives his daughter a boost up as well. The townsfolk who gathered wave as the man takes the oxen's yoke and leads them forward once more. "Safe travels," calls out someone from near the saloon. "Thank you," the mother replies, her voice already almost lost in the clatter of wheels. The covered wagon creaks onward, westward along the rutted road, until the family and their moving home are silhouettes against the late day sun. For a few minutes, the Dry Creek residents linger, gazing after the departing pioneers. Each person understands in their own way what that family faces. Weeks more of grueling travel, unpredictable weather, maybe sickness or injury far from help. Some in town made similar journeys years ago, and the memory of that hardship is still fresh. Others know they might never see that family again. The West is vast, and people come and go like tumbleweeds on the wind. With quiet hopes and perhaps a quick prayer for the traveler's safety, the townsfolk turn back to their routines. The brief encounter has left them reflective. In a place like this, everyone is tied together by the trials of the frontier. Whether one stays or passes through, everyone shares the bond of simply trying to survive and find a better life out here. Outside the general store, you notice a wooden bench carved with initials and names, graffiti left by travelers and locals alike over the years. JT 1869. One carving reads, and another simply has two initials and a crude heart. People often leave a small mark to say "I was here," knowing that one day they might move on, or that time might erase their presence. One particular name catches your eye on the porch post, where the sun now casts long shadows. Several years' worth of initials are etched there in a column. The oldest are barely legible. Weather has worn them down. The newer ones, like SC-71, stand out clear. Perhaps SC was a young man heading to Denver who stopped here for a night and scratched his initials for posterity. There's even a small cross carved next to one set of initials, and a date, a quiet memorial by a friend for someone who didn't make it further. These markings are humble chronicles of passing lives, left in wood because paper and ink are scarce and memories fickle. The afternoon light now slants more gently, taking on that honeyed glow that presages evening. Those few clouds on the horizon have gathered and grown subtly darker at the bases, a sign that there might be a brief storm or shower before day's end. A soft breeze picks up, rustling the sparse leaves of a cottonwood tree that stands near the church. Its leaves flash silver green in the wind, and a couple drift down, hinting at the approach of fall, though it's still late summer. One of the town's women emerges from her home and steps to the edge of the road, looking up at the sky and then around at her neighbors. "Storm's brewin' maybe," she calls softly to the blacksmith, who is now packing up his tools for the day. He glances toward the horizon and nods. "Could be a quick one," he replies. Conversations like these about the weather are important here. A storm can bring blessed rain or troublesome lightning, and everyone likes to be prepared. Sure enough, within the half hour, as late afternoon edges toward evening, those clouds roll closer and merge. The sky dims slightly, a premature dusk caused by the cloud cover. Then comes the smell, petrichor, the sweet, dusty fragrance of long, dry earth receiving moisture. A cool breeze gusts through town, billowing the sheets that the young woman had hung to dry outside. She hastily runs to gather them off the line as the first fat raindrops begin to plop onto the dirt. Plock, plock. Dark polka dots appear in the dust, which drinks the water greedily. It's just a summer shower, gentle and brief. The townsfolk collectively sigh in relief. It's been weeks without a good rain, and even a few minutes of it will settle the dust and perk up the gardens. Some folks step out to their porches to watch. The rain falls harder for a few minutes, drumming on the tin roofs with a soothing patter. Kids laugh and stick out their hands to catch the drops, tilting their faces up to let the cool water splash their cheeks. A few of the men dart into the street to rescue tools or goods left outside. The blacksmith throws a canvas over his coal pile. The livery boy quickly gathers some saddles left on a fence rail, but nobody runs for cover in a panic. This isn't a dangerous storm, just a kindly sprinkle from above. Within 10 or 15 minutes, the rain cloud passes. The sun peeks out again in the west, now nearing the horizon. Everything it touches is gilded and sparkling. The street is pocked with puddles that reflect the orange of the sun like little mirrors. Children hop in them despite their mother's mild scolding. The air feels cooler, washed clean. A rainbow even materializes briefly to the east, arching gently over the open plains as the departing cloud still releases a few trailing droplets. A collective sense of refreshment falls over the town. Faces that were flushed with heat now seem more relaxed. The ground, which earlier was so dusty, now gives off that wonderful wet earth smell. Mr. Thompson steps out of his store, taking a deep breath of the rain-cooled air. He lifts his hat and wipes his brow, then decides this is a good time to bring out the barrel of pickles from inside. The cooler air will keep them from spoiling as customers fish them out. Across the way, Mrs. Jenkins opens her windows to let the fresh breeze chase out the stale cooking heat from her house. Little acts of normalcy resume. The daily life continues, but now with a lighter step. By early evening, the sky is mostly clear again, the storm just a pleasant memory. The sun is low, casting long golden shafts of light between the buildings. A few riders from nearby ranches have come into town. You see them tying their horses to the posts outside the saloon and general store. They've likely finished their work for the day and decided to spend the evening in town, maybe for a decent meal or some diversion at the saloon. They dust off their hats and stretch their sore limbs after dismounting. One claps his buddy on the shoulder and jokes about who will buy the first round of drinks. There's a subtle shift in the town's energy as night approaches, an anticipation of leisure after the day's toil. Lamps and lanterns are being lit one by one. A soft glow begins to emanate from windows, a warm yellow contrast to the deepening blue of twilight outside. You catch the scent of supper on the breeze. Someone is frying up salt pork and onions, and elsewhere you think you smell the yeasty aroma of bread baking. At the boarding house, Mrs. Jenkins rings a small bell on her porch to announce to her boarders, and any townsfolk that care to join that supper is ready. This evening, it might be a hearty stew of beef and potatoes, with maybe some beans and freshly baked biscuits on the side. Nothing fancy, but hearty and filling. As dusk gathers, people gravitate indoors. The two ranchers who arrive tie their horses securely and step into the saloon. Another man, perhaps the circuit court clerk who's in town for a few days, locks up the small makeshift office next to the marshal's and heads to the boarding house for a meal and rest. A young mother carrying a toddler on her hip makes her way home from a neighbor's house, the little one half asleep against her shoulder after a long day of play. She hums a gentle lullaby as she walks, patting the child's back. The streets begin to empty of daily business, yielding to the coming night's quieter rhythm. Inside the boarding house, the dinner table is lit by an oil lamp that casts a gentle, flickering glow over the hearty meal. 3 boarders sit around the table, along with Mrs. Jenkins and her teenage daughter who helps serve. They eat slowly, the clink of forks on tin plates mixing with low murmurs of conversation. The traveling salesman recounts a minor adventure from his last journey, something about a flooded creek crossing, drawing polite chuckles. A farm couple in town to trade goods discuss quietly how their corn crop might do better with this rain that just passed. Mrs. Jenkins smiles and keeps everyone's coffee topped up. There is a sense of family at that table, even among people who aren't related, a camaraderie born of sharing a meal in a faraway place. In one of the homestead cabins on the edge of Dry Creek, a similar scene plays out with a rustic touch. The family of the farmer Bill, who left town earlier, sits around a rough-hewn wooden table. Their cabin is lit by a single kerosene lantern set in the middle of the table, its flame turned low, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. The farmer's wife has ladled out generous portions of bean soup into bowls for her husband and 2 children, and a loaf of cornbread sits waiting to be sliced. They bow their heads as the farmer says a quiet grace, thanking the Lord for the rain, the food, and the safety of another day. The amen is spoken, and they begin to eat. The only sounds are spoons against tin bowls and contented sipping. It's a modest feast that ends with a collective sigh as stomachs are finally full for the first time since morning. After supper, the mother takes a basin of now lukewarm water and a clean rag to wipe the dust from her children's faces and feet. The little ones smile drowsily as she cleans them gently. It's a small comfort, removing the day's grime. A full bath is out of the question tonight. Water is too precious and time too short. Most families reserve bathing for Saturday nights, or when truly necessary, heating tubfuls of water laboriously one pot at a time. Instead, a simple washcloth must suffice to freshen up before bed. Cleaned and in their nightshirts, the children shuffle to their bed, perhaps just a straw-filled mattress on the floor, and tug a patchwork quilt over themselves. By lamplight, their father opens the family Bible and reads a favorite psalm in a gentle, low voice. Tonight, however, the children plead for a story instead, and with a soft chuckle he obliges. He tells an old folk tale he learned as a boy about a clever coyote or a brave pioneer, speaking slowly and soothingly. Their eyes grow heavy as his baritone voice fills the cozy room. Before the tale even reaches its end, the 2 little ones have drifted off, each clutching a small homemade doll or carved toy. The parents share a quiet smile, pulling the quilt up under tiny chins and brushing a tender kiss on each child's forehead. These gentle moments, amid so much hardship, are what make it all worthwhile for them. Later, the father steps outside with a lantern to visit the outhouse behind their shed, one last time before sleep. The night air is brisk on his face as he walks the short path. Overhead, the stars glint brightly, and a barn owl flutters by on silent wings. He makes quick work of his business, mindful of the shadows. It wouldn't be the first time a stray skunk or snake startled someone out here in the dark. The wooden privy door creaks softly as he shuts it. Back inside, his wife has set a simple clay chamber pot under the bed for any midnight needs, sparing them another cold trip outside before dawn. These are the humble evening rituals of the frontier, securing the homestead, tending to nature's call, and finally sinking into rest behind locked doors and drawn curtains. Grateful to have made it through another day, he double-checks that the stove fire is safely banked and the lantern wick is turned down before crawling into bed. A stray spark or overturned lamp is a constant worry. With every building made of dry wood and water scarce, a single fire could engulf the town before dawn. But for now, all is safe. With these precautions taken, the family finally retires, whispering a final prayer of thanks for the shelter and safety of their home as they drift into well-earned sleep. At the boarding house in town, a couple of the boarders have decided to take an after-dinner stroll in the cooling air. They wander up the street and back, just stretching their legs and helping their meals settle. One carries a kerosene lantern held low, casting a warm circle of light on the ground. They speak in low tones about the weather, the rain earlier, trivial things, voices carrying easily in the quiet street. Mrs. Jenkins watches from her porch to ensure they don't stumble. She's left the porch lamp lit for when they return. Inside, dishes are drying on a rack, and the house smells of soap and the last traces of supper. As the sky deepens from twilight to night, Dry Creek's main street grows very still. Nightfall brings a profound darkness here. Far from any city, the stars begin to pop out, one by one, like old familiar friends. First the brightest planets, a shimmering Venus low in the west, then the reddish hue of Mars, then the canopy fills in with countless smaller points until the entire Milky Way paints a broad whitish band overhead. The moon tonight is just a thin crescent, offering little light. In its absence, the stars dominate, and the land below becomes a shadowy world of blacks and silvers. One by one, lamps are being extinguished in the homes. Families have said their prayers and curled up for the night. In the little church, which earlier stood silent, nothing moves. But if you were to peek inside, you'd see the faint outline of those benches, and maybe catch a lingering scent of wood polish and old candle wax. The town has an aura of peace at this hour. Not everyone in here is drinking hard. Some are nursing one drink for an hour just to enjoy the company and ambiance after a lonely day. In the corner, the upright piano is now manned by a wiry fellow in a threadbare suit vest. He's playing a jaunty but quiet tune, something like "Oh Susanna" or a folk waltz, the notes dancing lightly over the conversations so as to add cheer without overwhelming. Near the piano, a few men are gathered around a circular table, engaged in a game of poker by the light of a bright kerosene lantern hung above them. Their faces are intent but amiable. A couple of them chew on cigars, only one lit, glowing red at the tip as its owner puffs now and then, adding to the blue haze. Silver dollars and a handful of crumpled banknotes lie in the pot at the center of the table. These men aren't big gamblers. The stakes are modest, just enough to make it interesting. They murmur bets. "I'll see your 2 bits and raise you 2. And occasionally someone chuckles or swears softly at a bad hand. Knots in the wooden walls serve as unintended decorations, and a couple of small round pockmarks high up near the ceiling betray past gunshots. Those bullet holes, scars from a heated argument years ago, have been plugged with putty, but their shadows remain. Stories of that wild night get whispered to newcomers now and then. Such tales become part of the saloon's very timbers, reminders that even in this gathering place of camaraderie, tempers can flare. Tonight, however, is far from rowdy. It's just locals and a traveler or two enjoying a bit of society. At another table, 2 cowboys are engrossed in a game of checkers, a half-empty bottle of whiskey between them and small glasses in their hands. They move the checkers pieces in relative silence, the occasional scrape on the board, the only sign of their competition. One of them eventually lets out a "ha" as he makes a winning capture, and the other just shakes his head, smiling wryly and conceding. They pour themselves the last of the whiskey and toast each other's health. No hard feelings. Around them, a few other patrons are lost in low conversation, a miner bragging quietly about a find, likely exaggerated, a couple of farmhands gossiping about a new family that moved into a nearby valley, a traveling merchant listening more than he speaks as he gathers tales he might retell in the next town. The saloon girls, 3 of them tonight, weave through the crowd, their bright dresses a splash of color against the muted tones of denim and canvas. They laugh at jokes, they top off drinks, they might dance a little if someone feeds the Nickelodeon in the corner. Tonight, no one has. One of them, with red ribbons in her blonde hair, perches on the piano bench beside the player during a lively tune, tapping her foot and clapping in rhythm, encouraging a couple of the braver men to take a twirl on the tiny dance floor area. Indeed, two young ranch hands, fortified by drink and applause, attempt a clumsy reel. The sight draws laughter and cheers. The men aren't the most graceful, tripping over their own spurs at one point, but no one minds. It's honest fun. The piano player ups the tempo, banging out a faster rhythm. The dancers spin the saloon girls in their frilly skirts around, boots thumping on the wood. In the warm lamplight, you see smiles on sun-beaten faces, a kind of innocent joy shining through the toughness. When the song ends, there's a round of applause. Everyone is a little flushed and breathing hard from the excitement, but grinning. After that burst of energy, the mood returns to a relaxed murmur. The evening wears on, and a few folks begin to slip out to head home. The merchant has retired for the night, back to his room at the boarding house, as he plans an early departure at first light. The older farmer who was sipping whiskey has bid goodnight to the barkeep and stepped outside to walk to his cousin's home down the road where he's lodging. He pauses just outside the saloon to marvel at the brilliance of the stars for a moment, adjusting his eyes to the dark, then lights his pipe with a sulfur match. The brief flare illuminates his craggy face, and then he disappears into the shadows, a glowing coal on his pipe, the only trace of him, until that too fades around a corner. Inside the saloon, the crowd has thinned to a handful of diehards. The barkeeper wipes down the bar and flips a few chairs onto tables to signal that closing time isn't far off. One of the remaining patrons, a young man who spent the day driving cattle, is dozing off in the corner, hat over his face, an empty beer mug still in front of him. The saloon girls have grown tired too. One has already slipped upstairs to her room, and the other two gather empties and straighten chairs, their gaiety from earlier replaced by the fatigue that comes from long hours of keeping up a smile. Suddenly, from the poker table, a chair scrapes back loudly. One of the players, a wiry fellow with a week's worth of stubble, slams his cards face down on the table and stands abruptly. "Darn it, Frank, you're cheatin'," he barks at the man across from him. The piano music halts mid-tune, and a hush falls. For a tense moment, it seems trouble might spark. Frank, a burly cowhand, also pushes back his chair and rises, but he keeps his hands visible and up placatingly. "Now, Slim, nobody's cheating here. You just had a bad run of cards," he says evenly. His voice is calm but firm. Slim's eyes flash angrily, but around them both, the saloon reacts swiftly to douse the flare-up. The barkeep, a shotgun no doubt ready under the bar, though he hasn't reached for it yet, speaks up. "Gentlemen, take it easy. We're all friends in here." His tone carries the weight of someone who's broken up fights before. A couple of other patrons nearby rise and gently place a hand on Slim's shoulders. One man, an older prospector type, says, "Come on, son, let's walk it off. Ain't worth it." You notice Slim's right hand twitch near his hip, where earlier in the day a gun would have been, but of course it's not there. It's over at the marshal's office, and in this moment, everyone is silently thankful for that. Deprived of that fatal shortcut to violence, Slim hesitates, then the tension breaks. He grunts, and with a mix of frustration and embarrassment, yanks up his remaining coins from the table. "Keep your money," he mutters to Frank, more defeated than truly enraged, and stumbles toward the door. Frank exhales and nods, appreciative that the situation diffused. No hard feelings, he even ventures, but Slim is already halfway out, mumbling as he goes. The batwing doors flap behind him, and the piano player quietly resumes his melody, something soothing now, a slow tune to smooth the ragged edges of that moment. The other patrons exchange relieved glances. The crisis, small as it was, is over, and life flows on. Outside, Slim stands on the porch for a moment, breathing the cool night air. The sky has fully opened up to the cosmos now, His anger melts a bit under that infinity of stars. He kicks a pebble, sighs, and walks off to retrieve his gun from the marshal's office before heading to the livery to sleep it off in the hayloft. Inside the saloon, conversation resumes softly, a small reminder of how fragile the peace can be, but also of how the community tends to police itself, preferring calm over chaos. Before long, the barkeep announces last call. There aren't many takers for another drink. Most have had their fill. The atmosphere is mellow. The piano player segues into a gentle, almost lullaby-like tune, perhaps Beautiful Dreamer, to close the night. He plays softly as people finish up. The cowboys at the checker table have long abandoned their game and are now just quietly sharing stories of home, the checkered board forgotten between them. One of the saloon girls, the one with the red ribbons, yawns and stretches behind her hand. She crosses to the bar and murmurs with the barkeep. He nods and pats her hand, letting her retire a bit early. She ascends the narrow back staircase, every wooden step creaking under her tired feet, and disappears into the darkness above, where a tiny lamp will soon flicker in an upstairs window. Perhaps she'll write a brief entry in her diary, or brush out her long hair before collapsing into bed. It's been a long day wearing smiles and corsets, and she is glad to be alone. By and by, the last patrons settle their tabs, a few coins clinking onto the bar counter. The barkeep adds them to the till and thanks them kindly. They make their unsteady way to the door, offering him and the pianist a good night. "Good night, gents," the barkeep replies quietly as he flips a chair onto a table and wipes his broad mustache with a handkerchief. The piano's final notes hang in the air as the player lifts his fingers and closes the key cover. For a moment, the saloon feels like a church after service. Calm, reverent silence except for the distant chorus of crickets outside. At the very last, the barkeep walks to the entrance and hooks one of the batwing doors closed, then the other, leaving just a narrow gap. He'll not lock up entirely just yet. The custom here is to rarely lock doors. Trust still runs high, but he signals clearly that business is done for the night. The pianist packs away his sheet music, gives a polite tip of his hat, and exits with his instrument case in hand, headed to a small shack he calls home. Only the barkeep remains, wiping down glasses and the counter with a damp rag in the quiet, his heavy footsteps echoing on the plank floor. In a short time, he too will douse the lamps and climb the ladder to his own loft room above the bar. Outside, the town of Dry Creek lies in near total darkness now. A few faint lights glimmer through window cracks, a lantern turned low in a hallway here, a candle still burning on a bedside table there. But mostly, it's a world of silhouettes. The main street is empty. Above, the stars sparkle like diamonds on black velvet. The Milky Way sweeps overhead in a great glowing band. A meteor, one of the Perseids maybe, silently streaks across the sky, unnoticed by any sleeping soul below, but marvelous nonetheless. If you stand in the center of the road now, you can hear the subtle sounds of the frontier night. Insects chirp ceaselessly in the grass, their song rising and falling in waves. From far off in the distance, perhaps near the creek or the wooded bluff outside town, comes the lonely howl of a coyote. One starts, then several others join in a haunting chorus that carries over the open land. Dogs in town stir at that, a couple offering a bark or two in response before quieting again, as if knowing these wild cousins of theirs own the night beyond the fires of men. An owl hoots from the roof of the livery stable, where it's perched watching for mice. From within the stable, a horse shuffles in its stall and releases a soft nicker, either answering the distant calls or simply adjusting its position to rest. Down by the little creek at the edge of town, frogs add their voices, a comfortable croaking that when combined en masse forms a kind of lullaby. The air smells fresh and slightly cool, with a hint of dampness still clinging from the earlier rain. In fact, along the edges of the road, where puddles remain, you can hear the gentle trill of toads that have come out to enjoy those temporary ponds. In their modest homes, the people of Dry Creek sleep. Many of them are bundled 2 or 3 to a bed, children nestled together, or a husband and wife sharing a straw mattress, perhaps with a small baby cradled between them. Privacy is scarce out here. Families make do with one-room cabins, or maybe a curtain drawn to separate sleeping spaces. A few luckier ones have simple wood bed frames, but many just sleep on tick mattresses on the floor, stuffed with straw or corn husks. They're lumpy and attract lice or bedbugs sometimes, but after a long day of labor, folks are usually too tired to care. Inside one such cabin, the glow of an oil lamp still flickers. A new mother is awake, tending to her infant, who fusses with colic. She sits in a rocking chair near the hearth, a thin shawl around her shoulders against the night chill. Gently, she hums a soothing melody, an old lullaby her mother sang to her, while patting the baby's back. The child's cries soften, whether from the rhythmic rocking or the familiar voice in the dark. The mother's own eyes are heavy with exhaustion, but she will stay up as long as needed to comfort her little one. Finally, the baby falls back asleep with a tiny sigh, and the mother carefully lays them back in a crude wooden cradle. She gives the dying embers in the hearth a final stir, and adds a small log so there will still be a bit of warmth by morning. Then she returns to bed, easing herself under the covers beside her snoring husband, thankful for even a few hours of rest before dawn. Across town, in the marshal's dim office, Marshal Evans sits at his desk, a single lantern casting an amber halo around him as he writes in the town ledger. He notes the day's minor incidents: a drunk and disorderly, resolved without arrest; a property dispute between neighbors he agreed to mediate tomorrow; the handover of firearms from visiting cowboys, all returned before curfew. His pen scratches slowly across the paper. He pauses, rubs his eyes, and glances to the jail cell in the corner, empty tonight. With any luck, it will stay empty. He closes the ledger, locks it in a drawer, and stands stretching out the kink in his back. Taking the lantern, he steps outside for a final patrol. The marshal walks the main street one more time, boots crunching softly on the damp dirt. His silhouette passes each building, a reassuring presence, even if most everyone is asleep and doesn't see him. He listens to the night, the yips of coyotes far off, the rustle of the breeze through the dry grass, the creak of a sign. All seems well. He notes the closed doors of the saloon, gives them a gentle tug to ensure they're secure. He shines his lantern briefly down the alley behind it, just shadows and a cat darting away. Satisfied, he returns to his office. He leaves the lantern lit on a low flame and settles onto the cot in the corner, keeping his boots on and his revolver on the side table within arm's reach. He'll sleep lightly, as marshals learn to do, ears attuned to any disturbance like a horse's whinny or a shout. But he too drifts into rest, hat over his eyes, joining his neighbors in the realm of much-needed sleep. Now the town is profoundly quiet. Only the nocturnal creatures are awake and busy. A light breeze blows along the empty road, picking up a bit of leftover dust and making it dance in little whirls under the moonlight. That same breeze slips through the gaps in walls and gently stirs the curtains inside homes like a ghost tiptoeing through. It cools the faces of those sleeping, drawing soft sighs as they pull blankets up. Somewhere out on the prairie, a lone wolf howls, not aggressively, just its soulful hymn to the night. The cattle on a distant ranch huddle together for warmth and low softly, and a cowboy on night guard there hums a quiet tune to reassure them and himself. That tune is carried ever so faintly on the wind toward Dry Creek, a fragment of a lullaby blending with the rustle of leaves. The cycles of nature will repeat as well. Each season on the frontier brings its own trials and blessings. In the blazing summer, as we have seen, dust and heat dominate, and even the nights hold a hint of the day's warmth. In winter, this same town lies under a hushed layer of snow. Fierce prairie winds howl around the eaves, and the dirt road freezes hard as iron. Families bundle in whatever coats and quilts they have, often keeping a single fire stove burning through the night. Water pails left outside turn to solid ice by morning. Travel becomes perilous or impossible when blizzards sweep over the flatlands, isolating the town for days. Yet the people persevere. Children are sewn into their winter underwear to keep out the chill for months on end, and everyone shares what they can of wood and food until the thaw. Spring brings relief and challenges of its own, sudden downpours that swell the creek and turn streets to mud, but also wildflowers on the hills and the promise of new crops. Autumn's cool breezes carry the scent of harvest and wood smoke, though they can quickly escalate into dusty gales or violent thunderstorms. Through each changing season, the town endures. Neighbors help each other repair storm-damaged roofs, share meat from a successful hunt, or huddle together during a twister's roar. The people of Dry Creek take nature's cycles in stride as best they can, knowing that after the hardships of winter, spring will follow, and after the blazing summer, the land will cool and rest again. Another day will soon unfold with its routine, the creaking wagons, the rattling signs, the frying of bacon, the clatter of milk pails at dawn, the calls of merchants, and the ringing of the school bell. And after that, another day, and another, each much like this one, yet each unique in its little moments. In time, all these days and lives, with their small dramas and quiet struggles, will fade into history. The buildings will weather and perhaps collapse or be replaced. The names of the people who lived and loved here will slip from memory, preserved maybe in a journal entry or on a chipped tombstone under the prairie grass. The Wild West as they know it will pass. The railroads and telegraphs will stitch the land with modern threads. The frontier will close, and a new era will come. Yet, standing here in this singular day of early 1872, you experience life as it truly was, prosaic and profound in equal measures. No dime novel shootouts at noon today, no notorious outlaws rolling through town, no dramatic showdowns, just real people doing their best to survive and maybe carve out a touch of comfort in a challenging environment. You notice how many acts of quiet heroism occur in an ordinary day. A mother soothing her child despite her weariness, a father rising before dawn to tend livestock, a teacher traveling thousands of miles to educate frontier children, neighbors banding together to avert conflict or help a struggling traveler. There's a sturdiness to these folk, a kind of practical hope that carries them through each sunrise to sunset. It's clear that daily life here was no easy journey. If we, with our modern comforts and conveniences, were suddenly dropped into Dry Creek, we'd find it overwhelming. The relentless dust and hard labor, the lack of running water and electricity, the ever-present risks from nature, and the sheer physicality of every chore. Many of us likely wouldn't survive a day under the same conditions without longing for the ease of our own time. But these people, through necessity and grit, take it in stride. It's simply life for them, and they make do with what they have, finding moments of laughter, love, and community to balance the hardships. As you reflect on this, the night in Dry Creek deepens. In the distance, lightning silently flickers along the horizon. Maybe a storm far away, or heat lightning dancing in the clouds. It illuminates the underbelly of the distant clouds for a split second, a gentle reminder of nature's constant activity, even when our town is at rest. The stars above seem even brighter after the flash fades. Somewhere near the edge of town, on a slight rise where the ground is drier, is the town cemetery. It's a modest patch of land enclosed by a simple wooden fence. By moonlight, you can make out the shapes of a few wooden crosses and headboards. One cross stands taller, perhaps marking the grave of a founding settler or a beloved town elder. Others are smaller, some sadly short, to indicate a child. A recent burial is marked by a mound of fresher soil and a roughly hewn plank with a name in penciled letters. In the stillness of the night, that little graveyard almost glows, the wood of the markers pale under the moon. Here lie those who saw nights and days like this one and have now gone still. It's sobering to think of, but also peaceful. They are part of the land they loved and labored on. Occasionally, as now, a night breeze will pass through the cemetery, causing a loose piece of picket fence to creak, almost like a sigh. It might stir a wildflower growing by a grave, or cause the tall grass between the plots to ripple softly. In that ripple, you might imagine the whispers of the departed, or maybe just the land's gentle way of keeping them company. In town, the lamplight in the marshal's office finally goes out. Marshal Evans has decided to get a couple hours of real sleep. He's locked the office door and taken the key to bed with him. If needed, folks know they can rouse him. Across the way, the last light in the boarding house, the one in the hall left for guests, is blown out by Mrs. Jenkins as she heads to her own room, her slippers padding quietly on the wood floor. The window of Miss Miller's tiny room above the schoolhouse is dark. She stayed up a while marking some primers by candle, but has since succumbed to slumber, her dreams perhaps taking her back to the green fields of her Ohio home, or forward to hopes of what this town might become. All across Dry Creek, a profound stillness reigns. The prairie night is vast and enveloping, but within their humble abodes the townspeople are safe and together. The thick logs or simple boards of their walls separate them from the wilderness just outside, a wilderness that is at once beautiful and indifferent. Coyotes may trot down the very road we walked in the day, sniffing at doorsteps, but they'll move on, finding nothing of interest where humans lay claim. A nighthawk swoops low, catching a moth drawn by some residual light in a window, then disappears into the dark, its brief cry trailing behind. As you stand here in the center of this sleeping town, take in the scene one last time. Above, countless stars. Around, the low shapes of cabins and shops, the outlines of wagons and troughs, all touched by faint silver moonlight. The air is cool now. You might draw your coat closer. Your breath is quiet, and in your chest you feel a gentle kinship with the settlers around you, like you've shared in their day, shoulder to shoulder. As you close your eyes, try to hear the echoes of that old town settling into the night, the last wooden door being latched, the wind gently rattling a loose shutter, a lone horse stamping its hoof in the livery, the distant cry of a night bird across the prairie. Imagine the feel of the rough wool blanket pulled up under your chin and the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders. In the quiet darkness, perhaps you can taste a bit of the dust that always hung in the air, or smell the lingering traces of smoke and leather. These were the lullabies of the West, not a quiet countryside manor or a modern city hum, but a chorus of natural and human sounds blending under the vast sky. Through it all ran an undercurrent of hope and determination, even as each person battled fatigue and uncertainty. They listened to the coyote's song and the whisper of the wind through the tall grass, and they endured until morning's light. All the everyday moments we've wandered through, the creak of a wagon wheel, the sizzle of bacon on an iron pan, the laughter inside a saloon, the clap of thunder on a summer afternoon, the hush of a simple prayer at day's end. These became the fabric of their lives. Though those people are gone now, and their names mostly lost to time, their spirit lingers in these stories and in the very soil of the prairies. Tonight, we remember them gently. Sleep well now, as the frontier town sleeps under the same endless stars, and good night.